BAM is a communications agency that believes stories move the world. We move stories forward for technology-driven brands that challenge, change, and create entire industries. Today we have Jackie, Director of Brand and Comms at Primary Venture Partners on the show. Jackie is a creative, detail-oriented marketing professional with extensive experience producing B2C and B2B quality digital content and experiences. Let's dive in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dear BAMf, the podcast for marketing, comms, PR pros like yourself. We're sitting in our best COVID life ever, aren't we, Jackie?
Absolutely.
Today on the show, Jackie, I'm so excited you're here. Jackie Wasilczyk, as you guys heard from the top, is at Primary VC, has lots of great companies, is doing all the comms marketing stuff as it relates to them. And we have a whole set of questions to get into today. So I'm going to start off, if that sounds good with you, Jackie.
Can't wait.
Let's do it. First one, Dear BAMf. How can we build up hype and interest for our D2C brand launch for our pet-focused product now, amid COVID? As you probably know, there is a puppy explosion happening in the US, and our team doesn't want to wait for quote-unquote things to get better, as we're going to be in this pandemic for a while. Hence, we got to launch, but I, as the head of PR internally here, don't want to have crickets from potential customers on day one. Any ideas that might be more atypical given this marketing environment we're in? What'd you say, Miss Jackie?
So I would say this person's instincts are incredibly right. Instead of pitching / relying on traditional media where news cycles are incredibly unpredictable right now, I definitely consider to more atypical channels. I don't know if this would be so much as atypical, but I definitely consider turning to influencer marketing to drum up interest with relevant audiences. There's no shortage of amazing pop accounts that are incredibly popular. I'd also consider a landing page waitlist in advance of a product launch. I think that's a great way to grow your email base and make sure that there are no crickets. So I think Windmill, for instance, did an amazing job at this. They're the D2C new air conditioning brand, and they had so many people signed up, and they turned it into this really great press story, actually. So they're sold out and haven't technically even launched until 2021.
Oh, dang. Now, are they in your portfolio?
They're not. They're not. The other thing, too, is if there's product to give away, I'd consider sampling efforts with larger adjacent brands for increased visibility and awareness, and go where the audience is. Like dog parks are still open, right? And wondering if there could be like safe distribution of the product in the target market. I know like one of the cereal brands that recently launched, who I follow, Off Limits, they did a great job, and they actually created mobile sampling stations to fuel protesters in New York City. So that to me was like a very atypical way to kind of stand out and get product in the hands of consumers that they otherwise might not reach in this kind of COVID environment.
Oh yeah, that was a damn brilliant move. That was great on their end. Another thing too for this group or this brand that is considering this launch, which yes, I completely agree with you on, do it. You cannot time news cycles. We know elections coming up, but other than that, like who the heck knows what else is happening. So do it. Also, I've seen quite a few dog rescue, puppy rescue, just nonprofit organizations that are advocating for adoption of pets. And of course, now we're in this area or this time where, wow, they're at a dearth of adoptable pets because so many people have swept in and got stuff. But what you could do, and depends on your brand, but what you could do is partner with those organizations and go, oh, great, you guys are adoption-centered puppies, cats, whatever. Okay, pets. Wonderful. Hey, we'll give you some of our food and we can that's one of the packages that you get as the new pet owner. You get a month's supply of our food for free, something like that. And then you're doing some kind of good with them. Maybe they could do some cross promotion. Again, where your customer is.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I also feel too, people who are fostering animals right now, I see so many of my friends on social media constantly kind of tag who they're fostering with et cetera. So like if there is that kind of additional element, not just from the brand itself, but from like more of the micro following on social media, that could be a good way to kind of create some groundswell.
Oh, I have to say, I love the dog park idea. Like that's so grassroots. That's like Bumble back in the day with the sorority fraternity, like going into that. I love that. And that's outdoors. That could be COVID safe. That's great. Okay, next question here. Dear BAMf, I'm on the comms team and report to the CMO at a rather young startup that just got a decent size of funding. My CMO is insisting that, quote, we don't have anything to tell media right now. Given that we are B2B, this is somewhat true because though we have some major clients, we haven't gotten permissions from them just yet. However, we're starting at such a clean slate, no real media coverage to talk about to date, and we haven't even announced funding. So I'd like to get the ball rolling on something. Thought leadership, getting the clients in order, just focusing on the funding. What could I come back to my CMO with?
Yeah, I would say I'm honestly a little bit jealous because based on my experience with CMOs, they can sometimes have really unrealistic expectations when it comes to press coverage. So I would say, first of all, take a breath and revel in having an opportunity to exceed expectations versus disappoint anyone. And I would say it's still possible to get press and funding news, but you obviously want to make the announcement work as hard for you as possible. So wondering if there's any product announcement that you can include, or, if you're looking to hire, is it about really laying out the vision of the company and what you're going to do with that funding? Or if the value is to simply kind of get the word out there and take advantage of any SEO benefit, that's a way to just kind of get something out there. I think thought leadership is great, but it's so dependent, obviously, on solid distribution to make the efforts worthwhile. I always say you should never produce content just to do it. You need to really think strategically about what the value is to the reader and what you're going to get out of it as well. So bonus points if the content you're creating can be repurposed as lead gen, et cetera. And then also I would think about what's going on internally that might not be aligned with the product, but could tell a compelling story. So at the beginning of quarantine, a portfolio company was in the Wall Street Journal because they're running a story on 20-somethings working out of their parents' house. And if you don't have a ton of pressure to get coverage ASAP and you're looking for PR rights from customers, I would say put time into forging friendly relationships with reporters who might consider you to be a resource down the line. Even if it's not so closely tied with the product, it's a way to get increased brand recognition and valuable backlinks just by being kind of involved in a story that might be tertiary to what you're looking to get coverage for.
Mm-hmm. I love the concept and what you're pointing to, Jackie, which is, hey, spend the time making the relationships. So many places, companies, think, oh my gosh, right now I have something to pitch. So right now is when I talk to media. And that's fine if you have established relationships, or hopefully you have an agency that has those relationships to leverage. But if you're starting off only with hot news in my hand, where's it going to go? Where's it going to go? Let me get it to a media person. And you have no established media relationships. That's hard. And that is not a relationship building premise. That's just, you're going to pitch and hopefully get something if you're so lucky. And especially if you're a super young, smaller company. I mean, it's not like you're Amazon with the luxury of saying, hey, we changed our wallpaper, so of course that's covered. You don't have that luxury. So I would say this is a wonderful moment for this person to take advantage of the time you have to build those relationships with media, which of course now is a little bit different because you can't be going out to coffees and seeing people in any in-person form. But how do you show yourself as a resource? Is there anything you can get on the radar with these people? Even can you start following them all on Twitter? Get the 200, maybe top 100 people that you think would be the best media folks to eventually write about you. Start following them on Twitter, comment on their stuff, send them an email. Hey, that was a nice article. I can be a resource for you if you're ever needing X, Y, and Z. Not about your company, not about your self-serving aspect of here's how you can cover us, but instead, here's what I could do for you. Here's how I can be a resource. And then when you get to the inevitable time that there will be something hard or juicy, compelling to pitch, you'll already be way down the field with actually getting success and traction. That's what I suggest this person does. Spend that time on that amongst the things you're mentioning, Jackie, of like, well, potentially the thought leadership. Oh, potentially the other things going inside the company. But yeah, this is great for this person.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with what you said too, in terms of, so often with reporters, they just get asked for favors. So if you can prove and provide value to them before you even have to ask for anything, that's a huge win, and to kind of just establish that rapport. So when I started out, I was actually on the editorial side, and I always found myself covering, or more likely to cover, something if I knew the person who was asking me for that thing. Like if we had met up, if we, exchanged emails about things outside of work and just had that relationship. So I think that's great advice.
Also, to your point, favors are granted to those you have some cachet with, some relationship with. You don't just say, oh, here's a nice favor person I never talked to. No. You don't get favors starting from square zero, nothing established. So to your point, Jackie, make those relationships, spend the time. You're going to put yourself in such a great position. Hopefully, now the only thing with that, hopefully, is that this CMO is like, yes, that's of value. I see what you're doing. It doesn't show right now, but it's going to we're playing the long game here.
I was about to say the same thing. The kind of caveat to that is it takes time. And so I think that's one thing when you're just starting out and, you're a small team, probably a team of one, when you're looking or thinking about your bandwidth, it's like, okay, do I have the opportunity to kind of create those relationships, which is why, like, if you're lucky enough to have the budget to kind of work with a freelancer or an agency to kind of help manage that process, that's always really beneficial. Or, if it's like a slow period in your business too, like obviously during the summer months, for instance, things wind down for a lot of companies. So is now an opportunity where you can kind of set a goal for yourself and say, within the month of August, I'm going to reach out to 5 reporters about XYZ and just kind of see where that leads you, so that you can at least kind of set up these metrics to kind of show results down the line without sinking too much time into it.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully you got that nice CMO who's going to see the benefit.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yes. All right. Next question here. Dear BAMf, my company provides large sponsorship payment and free products to professional athlete models, celebrities. They made some poor choices and are now getting pressure to pull the sponsorships. This relationship is long-standing, extremely valuable to both parties, company with an image, professional, and physical product. Do we have to pull sponsorship? Can we let it blow over? Should we make a public statement about our choice? Okay, so before you answer, Jackie, let me dissect this question here. Okay, so the company that this person's at does big sponsorship payments and free products to all these fancy people. Okay, they made some poor choices. Okay, I'm assuming this person's meaning the company, now getting pressure to pull the sponsorship. Okay, so probably someone they've aligned with, athlete, model, quote unquote celebrity, is not in line with their brand image. And so now, even though the relationship is long-standing with this particular model, athlete, whoever it is, and is valuable, what do they do?
This one I'd say is a little bit hard to advise on without knowing the particulars of the situation. I would say more and more a brand's reputation value isn't built on what's sold, but it's built on what the brand stands for. So that to me, you definitely want to avoid any inconsistency between your mission and how you operate. Brands are getting skewered for that right now. And so I'm thinking if the brand is about inclusivity, for instance, and this athlete, model / celebrity was caught fat shaming, that is not good. That creates a major rift between the mission and how you operate, and consumers are going to call you out for it. That being said, if this person went to a house party during COVID, which made the news this past weekend, that might blow over and maybe not such a huge deal. So I would say like there are certain considerations I would keep in mind. So for instance, like the severity of the poor choices, will this be something that will continue to be relevant and part of the ongoing news cycle? And then also like how does it affect like the brand's corporate philosophy and the values? And how is that going to impact how the audience views the brand? So brand reputation and like thinking about it as a consumer would. So for instance, like if this happened to a brand you love, like how would you feel about it? Because again, like I think more and more consumers are expecting brands to be socially responsible and accountable for sure.
I'm on the same page with you. And I think the next level of this is the values. So what are the core values of the brand? And did this person act not in accordance with those values? Now, that could be a slippery slope, but there is some delineation, I feel, to that can be quite clear. So for instance, if you value, let's say, inclusivity, for example, and this person made a public display of not showing that by, let's say, fat shaming, to your point, Jackie, that would say that is against our values. And that's pretty pointed. If, however, that's a cut and dry. If, however, this person, I don't know, has some silly comment or silly something that just that's not flattering. Maybe they're saying, oh, I registered to vote and you don't like that or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what's kind of a mild thing where you're like, ooh, that maybe like set us off, but is not a bad thing. And it's not in alignment with your values. I think that's okay. And that, given it's an established long relationship, it sounds like you have a discussion with that person. And that, unfortunately, is the nature of dealing with celebrities and athletes, especially now, because for the first time really ever, we're seeing a much more intimate look at folks than ever before. Sans makeup, sans not in the studio, it's real time for a lot of these folks. So with that comes a lot of opinions and thoughts and views of things. So for example, here, I guess maybe this is a more tangible example, but like you're a makeup brand. Okay. But nowhere in your, maybe one of your values is diversity of the people we show. Okay, great. But then this person does an Instagram live and they don't have makeup on. Is that really against your values? Or is that just like, that's not just, we don't like that. There's a big difference between we don't like that versus, well, that's not with our values. So that's the line I think to fall on and know the distinction of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like how the individual reacts as well. Like if the person who made the poor choices is publicly contrite and it feels genuine, and to your point, the severity of the choice isn't extreme and it's a beneficial relationship, then I think that makes a lot of sense to move forward. But you really don't want to keep something that really feels really at odds against your brand's values, for sure.
This is always the risk too. I'll tell people, of any time you're doing any human, basically, celebrity, athlete, model, whatever, you're dealing with humans who have their own thoughts and opinions and everything versus like the Geico Gecko. That is a totally controllable asset. This is not. Humans, unpredictable, difficult, higher risk, just naturally. Go with an animated thing if you need to like fully control the message. Cartoons, great way to go.
How do you feel about the public statement component?
That I think goes back to the line though of where is it? If it's, this is against our values, then you put the public statement. This is against our values. This is why we've terminated our relationship with so-and-so. And moving forward, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. This is like PR crisis 101. If, however, it's, we didn't like how you Instagram live without makeup on, you're sponsoring our makeup. Okay. That probably isn't something to make a further fuss about. However, I'm reading into this person's response or query that there is some hubbub about this, that it's, anytime you're using the phrase like blow over, there's usually an explosion that has happened. There's something catastrophic. So I'm sensing that there is then need that this person has acted out of bounds and against those values. And if that is indeed the case and you are distancing yourself away from it, then you would publicly say that. The other side of the coin of that, though, is If you are still standing with that person who acted not in accordance with your values, then you should also be issuing a statement. But that's also, then I'm like questioning, why are you working at this place, person who wrote in? Because, that's now to me a troubling position to be in. Of like, yeah, we're all about inclusion, but this is a racist person we represent.
And we're okay with working with them.
Sit well, and we're okay because this person makes us a lot of money. That's the other aspect of it. So, I would say definitely you got to go with the public statement. Definitely you need to look at those values, and then you would obviously pull the sponsorship if that was the case.
Yeah, it's so much harder these days for brands to remain silent, and consumers just don't expect them to, and they want them to be active and really take every opportunity possible to kind of reinstate what they're about.
First thing I just thought of this, I don't know why this came back in my mind, but with Tiger Woods, when that whole shitstorm erupted and he lost a lot of sponsorships. Now, I don't know where in Nike's goals necessarily or values they say, hey, being a good husband / partner / not being an asshole is part of their values, but it's probably in there somewhere, which is why, they remove themselves from that. And which is further why Nike has been a phenomenal brand that has definitely stood and doubled down on Black Lives Matter and all those things and all the things of the movement there. So not only has it been, I know this doesn't pertain necessarily to this person in this situation where it's like, ooh, what do we back away from? But also, where do we step into and step up for even more when there's things happening? And Nike's a great, I think, case study on that in so many ways.
I mean, Nike is just such a great brand case study.
It just is. Yes. All right, Jackie. Well, to round out our chat today, we have one last one. Oh, and it's pandemic related. Okay, great. Dear BAMf, given the pandemic, our product has had to shift from big box retailers to D2C. The good news is our pivot is going strongly and our marketing efforts are paying off. My concern, however, is for our partners in retail. Our pricing for our products is currently identical to what consumers would find in a big box, but our CEO is saying we should make our pricing cheaper than that in retail stores because our margins aren't being cut into with D2C, and she wants to do that now. I'm concerned this approach will really piss off our retail partners. How can I communicate this to our retail partners as this shift is looking inevitable?
I really appreciate how empathetic this marketer is.
Yes.
I appreciate that. And I would say, this is a tension that feels like it's playing out across more than just the retail vertical. Like, for instance, with restaurants and the increased dependence on delivery, they're looking to first-party platforms to avoid additional compromised margins. So, for instance, like our portfolio company, Lunchbox, they've seen a huge uptick because they're enabling restaurants to handle first-party ordering themselves. I would say for this person, if the shift is looking inevitable and the CEO really wants to make it, the best you can do is be a transparent, proactive partner and share the rationale behind the change, provide whatever assurances you can that the retail partner remains valued. And hopefully this will be a temporary shift considering the current dynamics. I can't imagine that big box retailers don't understand what's going on given the pandemic. So you would hope that, while they might be disappointed, they recognize the reality of the situation. And given how empathetic this marketer sounds, if she or he approaches it transparently and with candor, the relationship would be preserved to see another day down the line.
Another thing too, to consider, even though you're saying, it looks kind of inevitable, is what can you do that's exclusive to your D2C channel? Are there only products? Are there only offerings? Are there only, not let's say, steep discounted pricing or distinct pricing where you're like, wow, everything on the site is 25% cheaper, but instead where you're like, well, we're running on our website only this sale that is a discount of X. So it's a temporary offering. Same thing with the only offering of it's only available online on our website, this line of product or this special. That can be a delicate way to maneuver around this because the thought of keeping for a long term a substantial discount across your products that you know are already in the retails, which of course they have an understanding of this ridiculous time, but assuming that's going to eventually come back into some form at a later state, that might be your better avenue. Is what are the temporary, what are the special, what are the exclusive things that my consumer can only get coming to our website?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of only at Neiman Marcus, only at Macy's, or wherever this place is being sold.
Yeah. Or potentially the reverse of, to appease the big box retail partner, is it that they get a version of an exclusive product where like everything else might be discounted on the D2C site, but at the same time, the retail partner is getting something special that is unique to them that people will still go to the big box retailer for. Like I can give that example too of having just moved and looking for fans. There is definitely on Bed Bath & Beyond, like certain exclusive fans from a brand that I was like, okay, I ended up buying it through Bed Bath versus the retail store.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Jackie, well, those are all the questions for today. Thank you so much for being on here, especially after you just moved and your life is chaotic and, COVID. So, Jackie, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to Dear BAMf, the advice podcast for PR and marketing pros like you. Our show is created by BAM, a PR and marketing agency headquartered in San Diego and New York City. The music you're enjoying today was composed by Tiffany Dizon, produced by Daniel Kessner, and played by San Diego Symphony's Art of Alon. Thank you to our podcast production team at Citizen Recording. If you have a tough PR and marketing question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at bamtheagency.com/Dear BAMf. Don't forget the F. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of Dear BAMf. Until then,